Welcome to The Exchange with KB, where we get to know interesting people and their thoughts on blockchain, building and scaling businesses, success and failure, and much more. Today, I'd like to introduce Kendrick Nguyen. Kendrick is the CEO and co-founder of Republic, an investment platform that provides both accredited and non-accredited investors around the world with access to curated startups and crypto projects. Welcome, Kendrick.
Thank you so much for having me on The Exchange. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you. I'm so excited to be talking to you, and I got a ton of questions that we'll go through. So yeah, first, I just kind of like to get your background. Could you tell us how it all got started? I know you've got quite an impressive resume, and I was just reviewing it with you on the air. But I'd love to hear how it got started.
Yeah, I would describe it as a slightly non-traditional founder's background. I started out as a securities lawyer in New York. Myself is an immigrant from Vietnam. Practiced law in New York City for a couple of years. I went into asset management, worked for a very large hedge fund / fund of funds. I went back into academia at Stanford for almost 2 years. Launched a couple of small businesses that actually one of which worked out very well. But there came an opportunity for me to join AngelList as its general counsel back in early 2014. And I joined AngelList and loved the team, the mission of like democratizing investing in venture capital. And fast forward in 2016, a law came into place to allow everyday people, doesn't matter what background, what income or net worth, to invest in private startups. And so we launched Republic to hopefully realize the true potential of retail investing.
Awesome, and that's the Jobs Act, I presume you're referring to there, and we'll talk about that a lot more, I think, as we go through. But I'd love to hear. Even before your career got started, you said you're an immigrant from Vietnam. How old were you when you came?
9.
Okay, cool. And your parents brought you over. Was there just any specific reason, or just seeking better opportunity, or?
Yeah, back then, in the late 80s, early 90s, there's a wave of immigrants from Vietnam as a consequences of the Vietnam War, falling into communists' hand, and Vietnamese who, for varying reason, sought refuge in the U.S. And my parents were one of those people. And I gotta say, as volatile and sometimes worrisome that we are about our country today, with all of the toxic environment and dialogue in politics, it is still by far, in my opinion, the absolute best country out there. That is my story couldn't possibly have happened anywhere.
I know, I completely agree with you. I am an immigrant as well. I came from Belarus back when it was USSR in 1989. I was 11 years old, so similar age to you. My parents brought me, as a kid, and I, went to school. I grew up in the U.S., so I could totally relate to that as well. And I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of problems in this country, as is probably in a lot of other places, but we have the checks and balances, and we have a lot of other great systems that work well. What do you think?
And the most important thing is the education system that we have, expensive as it may be, but that, and beyond that, just opportunities in the U.S. Are more available to people irrespective of their background, more so than anywhere else.
Yeah.
We're hoping to level the playing field even more, but comparatively speaking, for such a large country, the opportunities are available to an amazing extent.
Yeah, it's incredible, and I want to dig into the Republic a little bit later, because I think you're absolutely right. Where the opportunities are amazing, and this whole idea of investing into private companies could be very lucrative for people, right? And a lot of people want to do it, but before recently, 2016, people weren't able to, and I think that it's kind of a passion of mine. This whole, I think, the accredited investor and that whole system creates a class potentially which excludes people, right? And we'll talk about that as we get to Republic. But I want to learn a little bit more about you, I guess, as far as like, you started law school. Is there anything specific? Why did you turn to law as sort of a child, a son of immigrants that came here?
So a lot of immigrants, particularly those from a turbulent environment, they they cherish security. So to my parents, you gotta go to college and then hopefully get a professional degree, and that's the way to buy a certainty to a middle class life that they didn't have, and that to have a house with a white picket fence, like truly living the American dream. So the path for that, for particularly Asian Americans and Asian immigrants, you got to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. I mean, there isn't too many other options really. And I love law. So my undergrad, I actually studied neuroscience because I wasn't sure whether or not I was going to go into medicine, science, or law. My personality, I'm argumentative. I love dispute resolution. So I knew even from an earlier age that I wanted to pursue law.
Gotcha. That's very interesting. Yeah, I saw that you had the medical studies as well in your background. So you could have basically had either one of the options, and law was just something that felt better for your personality.
I think I'm a pretty decent lawyer, and I would have been a terrible doctor. So I'm very glad to report that looking back, I definitely chose the most suitable career path for me.
That's great. And one of your first jobs, it looks like, was a Goodwin Procter. Is that right?
Yeah, I started out at Goodwin Procter, and I did both litigation, patent litigation, securities litigation, as well as some corporate work. But we represented Fidelity, big financial firms against SEC and securities chargers.
Gotcha. How did you like working? And I don't know how big Goodwin was back then. I think it's been growing, I would imagine, and it's a known name. I mean, I know they're in Boston as well, and it's a firm I know. But how did you like working for sort of a corporate a lawyer right out of school?
Yeah, people who are in law probably are new to this background. So basically, law school doesn't teach you anything about being a lawyer. It teaches you how to think like a lawyer. And so when you graduate, in terms of like priority, if you can get a job at a large law firm, which usually pick those at the top of their classes at larger, more well-known law schools, if you can do that, then not only the pay is very, is top of the market, and secondly, the education, the continuing true practice legal education, that's where you learn how to be a lawyer, is by being at a law firm.
Mm-hmm.
Law firm, the more well-known, the more teachers, the more partners, the more experienced talents that you have around you to learn from. So I would say by and large, when most students would go with a large law firm like Goodwin Procter if given the opportunity.
Nice.
Fortunate enough to have that chance.
That's great. Did you know you wanted to be an entrepreneur right when you started that job, or no?
There's a saying that say that you can't be what you can't see. And when I grew up, again, back to my immigrant heritage, looking around my family, my distant family members, and my parents' friends, there are a lot of professionals, but even though we grew up in the Bay Area, personally, I didn't know any tech entrepreneur, and certainly didn't know any venture capitalist. So the notion of founding your own company was very, very not quite in my worldview, Umwelt, some would call, when I was in college or law school.
Gotcha. That's awesome. And then so then from there you moved on to a Permal Group, it looks like. And was that a large company or no?
It was always an entrepreneurial streak in me. So when I was at a law firm, I knew that I don't want to be there forever. You learn for a couple years and look around me, and I was like, that's not a life that I wanted. I didn't want to just be in my 60s and make a lot of money, but just, practicing law. I knew that wasn't the calling. So for all large firm attorneys, one of the most sought after jobs is to be general counsel for a company. And the most sought after type of companies is that of a hedge fund or an asset management firm. Pamor at the time was one of the largest asset managers in the world. So I joined them as an associate counsel and then came to lead the entire legal department.
That's excellent. So it looks like you're on your way to learning more about capital markets, right? Right, almost immediately, right?
Right after I joined, and the company was managing, over $30 billion in capital, and the financial crisis hit. So many a sleepless night thrusted into a senior role when I didn't really have too many years of experience. It was a tremendous learning experience, though not necessarily one that was physically, enjoyable, but,
Right.
but very valuable.
And do you think that you walked away? I mean, did you learn a lot about interactions with, I don't know, regulators, investors? What kind of stuff did you walk away with from that job?
Oh, at a law firm, you learn how to think like a lawyer. At a company, and particularly at a time that was during the Great Recession in my role, that's when can the lawyer learn how to think from the business angle, all the considerations, the pragmatism that are necessary for one to make a decision in a business setting and not just be an advisor or a counselor. So that was professionally, that was the biggest learning. Personally, a huge lesson on my end that money alone doesn't matter. We move billions and billions of dollars around transactions, and it was a very well compensated role. And after the novelty wore off, that wasn't enough for me. So I knew that I wanted to do something else as well.
Right. So does money motivate you? Are your future career choices based on compensation or money, or no?
Glad to report that I'm at a stage in my life and of a personality that there's a baseline of financial sufficiency below which you have to compromise a lot, but that's not a very high threshold. What gets me up in the morning and what makes me and drives me to put in consistently 18-hour days is not money nor fame.
Okay. Yeah, I know, coming from another immigrant perspective, money in itself, and I'm speaking for myself, does motivate up to a certain point, right? Because I always have this fear: what happens if I lose everything, right? Everything I've earned and I have to go back to nothing. What happens then? This fear has been instilled in me, I think, since I was a kid growing up poor, and I still have it today. Is that something you can relate to?
Oh, for sure. In at least I would say that that's the need for security that had been impressed upon us by the prior generation. And God bless my parents; they're like literally my heroes. But no, we live in the wealthiest country, and we're so lucky to have the opportunities that we have and be where we are and have all the social network. So I really think that at least I can speak for myself, that I should do and spend my time doing things that I find to be most meaningful and fun, and hopefully that generate byproduct that involve money, but that's
Sure.
still money and wealth is and has not been a driving force for a good number of years.
Yeah, yeah. I think money is sort of, at some point it's certainly needed to live, but then this is what I hear from a lot of other people: is they make more of it. It becomes something more of keeping the score, right? I mean, how much money does a person need to live a fairly good lifestyle, even in the most expensive cities in the world? That money, a lot of people have that, so it's
You know, In my the way I see it is that money buys freedom,
Right.
by happiness. Now, if you're not careful with how you structure your life and the pursuit for money, at one point it will no longer buy freedom, but restricts you. If you keep acquiring more and more and more, let's say, a vacation home in 20 different cities, just the cost of managing it, worrying about fire and flood and hurricane, do you or do you not have more or less freedom? I would say not having those acquisition probably would be more conducive to happiness.
And who has the time to use all those vacations homes, right? Right, right. So let's fast forward a little bit here. So it looks like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you started a company called Counsel Works a few years after this asset management job. Um,
Yes, so I after Pomor, I went back into academia. Worked for that there was an opening at Stanford for Corporate Governance, which is a collaboration between the law school and the business school. And they at the time they have these fellow, which is a full-time position for academic research and teaching. And I was one of the couple of fellows they take in every single year. And there was one opportunity to reintegrate myself into an ecosystem that is the Bay Area where I grew up but did not spend any time, after college at. So got to get to know the people, learn the legal and the business environment there. And at the same time, that's when Obama administration passed what is known as Dodd-Frank. It's a sweeping set of regulations that resulted in a lot more obligations and filing requirements for investment advisors, broker dealers, and the like. So I helped co-founded the practice to advise wealth manager on regulatory compliance.
Gotcha. So it was a strictly a law practice, or
No, it's not a law practice at all. It's a consulting.
consulting? Okay, gotcha. And you just saw a market need, or tell me how you came up with the idea.
Yeah, I actually launched my own. I just saw this immediate, a startup, building a startup, meaning identifying a problem, and if you have a solution, the two combine. If there's a product market fit, it's a business. So there was clearly a need for cheaper consultancy than law firms were and now are able to provide. So it wasn't a very difficult business model to execute, and then very quickly folded under the larger name called Counsel Works, which was then an East Coast consulting firm.
Nice. And it looks like you guys grew pretty quickly and then ended up being acquired fairly quickly as well.
Yeah, it got acquired after I had already left.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, congratulations. I mean, it sounds like it was a well-run and a nice business to be in. And so now that's where it gets interesting. So it looks like you leave there, and did you go right into AngelList, or tell me about how you got introduced to AngelList and how that whole thing happened?
At the time, there was a relationship between AngelList and Stanford recommended to AngelList management to talk to Ken at Counsel Works to help resolve a regulatory issue. And one discussion with them led to another one to say, hey, why don't you join us as our general counsel? And at the beginning, I was like, oh, I'm not sure I'm that interested. But I really very quickly bought in, 100%. On the mission of democratizing investing and providing more access to capital for entrepreneurs. Counsel Work was going very well, but in life you got to go with what you're excited about in terms of mission alignment.
Great. And it sounds like, or at least based on your profile, you kind of held two different roles there. And tell me about, I mean, it says general counsel and venture hacker. Now, general counsel, I'm very familiar with. What's venture hacker? Define that.
The AngelList has a rather unusual corporate culture in that everyone's encouraged to undertake and pursue any business project that they think would help entrepreneurs, help founders in Silicon Valley and beyond. And they call those positions venture hackers. You're hacking, disrupting traditional venture ecosystem. And the business angle of my role was on international expansion, helping push AngelList into Europe, lay the roadmap for AngelList Canada, and launching a number of new financial products.
And is AngelList now a global company?
Yeah, AngelList now has presence in Europe, in Canada, and in India.
That's excellent. I mean, I just have to say I'm an avid investor, user. I don't know what to call it on AngelList. I think when I came across AngelList, I believe in about the same time, about 2014 or so. And I just thought like, wow, this is amazing, because for me, you know, as sort of the little guy, but I'm, you know, was very interested in startups. And, you know, I'm not an LP with a VC fund or anything like that. I have very limited time. I mean, AngelList for me provided a perfect platform to give me opportunities to look at some pre-vetted companies that other syndicate leads and other people who you know, at least I hope have done some due diligence and have spent time on it and present very interesting companies. So I think I started investing around that time, and I've probably invested in close to 30 different companies at this point through AngelList. So I'm a big fan of the product as well.
Thank you for having been a part of the family for so long.
Yeah, and continue to do so. And I think I'd love to get your thoughts on VC. So I was talking with someone, with a VC friend about this the other day. So VCs, as you probably know, I mean, these days are raising huge rounds, right? So some of the more prominent, some of the bigger venture capital funds recently have been in the billions of dollars, and that is really not has been unheard of in the past decade. So my question is, do VCs lose the drive to return alpha, to return profits, to, you know, bigger profits to their LPs? Because if they're running a $1 billion, $2 billion fund, and their model is the 2 and 20 or something close to that, right? The traditional 2% management fee and 20% success fee. What's the incentive for them to do better than they did before? If they're already getting paid, you know, 2% out of $1 billion is a lot of money.
Well, I mean, that's you always run into the problem of, you know, raising a large fund and then deploying that huge chunk of capital in a way that yields returns year after year. But it's in the very much the same way that I think that when LPs invest in a fund, large or small, the management team is the people behind these operations that matter, whether you're deciding to invest in a startup or whether you're deciding to invest in an investment fund. And the team that you should invest in should be a team that cares so much about what they do. In the case of a venture fund, that love being investors and supporting and identifying the next great business, love that more than just making money. So hopefully by picking the teams that are truly driven and who do what they do best, that it doesn't matter, that they would know that the amount of money that they're aiming to raise for a fund has no bearing on their drive and motivation to yield returns for their LPs, for people dealing with them.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, kind of back to AngelList for a second, but AngelList really revolutionizes and democratizes this whole process in a way, because you don't have to become an LP to invest in a startup. I mean, you still have to be an accredited investor, yes. But
not
you don't,
Republic.
right. So we'll talk about Republic, because I think what you guys are doing is taking it to the next level, and that's even better. But for AngelList, right, you have to, you know, be an accredited investor, but you don't have to pay the management fee. So you get a chance to see all of these different companies come across. And I think Republic will be in the same boat, right? You don't have to worry about, hey, I'm giving this guy $1 million, $100,000, or whatever. And every year there's a management fee, no matter if they provide a yield or not, right? So that's something that is more favorable for that LP.
And the syndicates on AngelList, by and large, do not have management fees, right? So that's a big difference between investing into a traditional investment fund versus into AngelList syndicate.
Yeah, exactly. So cool. So let's move. Let's talk about Republic. So tell me how the idea came up. I mean, was it related to when the Jobs Act was passed? Were you looking out for this? Was this something in the back of your mind, or how did you come up with the idea for it?
AngelList was one of the lobbying forces behind the Jobs Act, and so I had been tracking it during my time at AngelList. And when we knew, or when I heard that the law would be fully implemented in May 2016, I still remember in the early part of 2016 looking at it and thinking that this is the true potential, really the key for true democratization of investing, of entrepreneurship, that opening it up to everyone rather than just accredited investors. So I went to Navarre on the board and asked their permission to leave and launch Republic, and so grateful that they said yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the AngelList team is still on board as an investor, as an advisor. What's their role right now with Republic?
AngelList is essentially an institutional co-founder.
Institutional co-founder. Excellent.
Yes, they did invest capital into.
Yeah. So what tell me more about Republic. What's the mission? I mean, where do you see, what does it do, first of all? Maybe talk about that in a little bit more detail, and what's its mission? Where do you see it's going in the coming years?
Yep. So Republic, in short, Enable is a platform where it doesn't matter if you're a student or a teacher or a millionaire or a billionaire, you can come and very quickly, within a couple minutes, if you see a company that we've curated and feature on Republic, you can make an investment using ACH, wire, a credit card, even Bitcoin, to participate as little as $10, $20. So that's the core functionality of it. The mission is to build out, I would say, Amazon, but for private investing instead of for buying and selling product. I do think that if everyone, or say half the US population, invest in small amount, micro invest in the new generation of businesses that they want to see in the future, that ours and the world will be much more prosperous of a society, of a community, of an ecosystem, and there will be many, many more Uber and Airbnb and Microsoft and Intel and Apple that otherwise would never have a chance to see the light of day if they just rely on venture capitalists to back.
Right. And any idea, so I'm totally into, the democratization part and how it helps the society and helps new companies get started and all that. But for the person that's investing the money, so let's say someone who is, just a regular person, has a full-time job, but they don't know much about investing, yet they have a 401k account and maybe some stocks that they've bought on their own or with the help of an advisor, and they, the stock market returns, S&Ps maybe 8-10% per year or something like that. It's been tracking for the past couple decades. But if they were to turn to something like a Republic and invest into a private company, a young startup, any idea what kind of returns they could expect? I mean, in the long term, right? So a lot of these startups will fail, some will succeed, but any idea overall what that could look like for those investors?
When it comes to investing, the earlier stage a company is, the higher the risk and the higher the potential return. So for seed investing, I would say if you invest in 10 companies, on average, you got to expect that you're going to lose money on 8 of them. And 2 of them will return multiples of your investment. Meaning, so let's say you take one extreme example, Uber. Which fundraised the first $1 million on AngelList. If someone invested $1,000 into the earliest round, that $1,000 today is worth well north of $10 million in value, which is a massive thousands of in multiple. Now, very unlikely that if a person make their first 10 venture investments, that not at least 6 or 7 of them would be complete zero, but you count on 1 or 2 whose return would more than make up for it. So the curation on AngelList and the curation on Republic hopefully will make that odds a little bit more in favor of the investors. But please, anyone who invests in early stage startup gotta know that it's very high risk, and you gotta be able to tolerate the total loss.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally. I mean, I always say, I mean, the only, and we'll talk about regulation next a little bit because I'm interested to hear your opinion on some of the stuff that has been going on recently with the SEC and maybe the Jobs Act, things like that. But, you know, in my view, like the only disclosure, or one of the only disclosures that should be sort of on the front page of every prospectus that anyone puts out is, be prepared to lose all your money. Your investment could go to zero, right? I mean, don't get angry later if you've lost all your money, because this is a very risky business. It's a risky investment, high risk, high reward.
Now, if you're going to invest in a venture fund or a private equity fund and pay 2% in management fee, 20% in performance fee, and typically these funds require the minimum investment amount to be, 50,000, 100,000 at the very least or more, is not very often you will lose all of your money. You may not get 12% return, 20% return every year. It may go down to 80% of the dollar, 80 cents on the dollar that you put in, but not zero. For early stage investing, the name of the game is diversify. Smartly invest small amount in as many as you like and find attractive in hope of diversifying that risk of loss.
How difficult is it for a startup to get onto Republic? You mentioned the curation process. How difficult is it?
My team keeps saying that we're more selective than Harvard. Out of 3,000 plus applications, we've launched 60 projects so far. So because most even very mission-driven founders aren't quite ready yet to fundraise from investors. So it's a really selective, curated process.
If Uber was launching today, you mentioned they raised their first million on AngelList. If Uber was launching today and they applied, would they have been selected, do you think, or no?
Not necessarily, not 100%, but probably more likely than not. And we look at a few things: the quality of the founding team. Do they have domain expertise? And is it a big problem that can yield tremendous return? And each of those questions, as applied to Uber, the answer would be very positive, even at the earlier stage. So I would think so.
Cool, interesting. And so, and for the entrepreneurs, the founders, if they were to go to Republic to try to raise their capital, what are the advantages over going to like a VC or some of the other options available?
VC and retail investing or crowd fundraising are not mutually exclusive. People should do both. And they have to make sure they have the bandwidth to do both, or else stagger them. VC brings the capital and the expertise, the value, the network. Crowd fundraising from the crowd brings some capital and a unique marketing value in that you turn every customer into a brand ambassador. If you, assuming that you drink vodka, and there's no difference between Sky and Absolute Vodka, but if you're somehow $100 investor in Sky Vodka, what are you going to buy at Christmas, New Year's, July 4th? You're going to buy shots for your friends or Sky Vodka and say, hey, I'm an investor. I mean, you don't need to tell them how much of an investor you are. It's just that sense of engagement psychologically that we all know is true, that brings a truly unique value in addition to capital in the case of crowdfunding.
Awesome. And you guys have, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you launched maybe last year Republic Crypto or Crypto Republic. Is that like a separate, a sister company, or is that just a different way for crowdfunding cryptocurrency and ICO type companies?
In short, it's just a slightly different branding because crypto is viewed by some as like its own ecosystem. But in short, what is blockchain but a technology? What is a blockchain leverage project but a startup? And token sales or ICO, it's just a way of fundraising. So of crowdfunding, in fact. So it's perfectly aligns with what we do on the traditional tech, traditional business side of the operation of our operation. And it just happened to be a new but robust sub-segment of that, and we brand it slightly differently.
Okay, and are you a believer in blockchain technologies? What are your thoughts on blockchain as a technological innovation and what it can do to to the world?
I'm not the only one who believes so, but I do think that it is possibly the most important technological innovation of my lifetime. And I think that we haven't seen, we're a minute or two into this new era, and a minute or two into the first wave of adoption and iteration of blockchain technology. And the next 4 or 5 years, I think the world will be fundamentally different compared to what we are today because of blockchain technology.
And what do you think? So I mean, like, there's been a lot of controversy lately about the regulations. SEC has recently shut down a number of different ICOs. I mean, yourself being an attorney, what do you think? I mean, the ICO space has sort of been a wild west for a year or two, and now it's kind of flipping the other way. It's becoming it's becoming more and more regulated. I mean, is regulation needed? What are your thoughts on what's going on?
So currently, at least in the US, the existing legal framework or frameworks, because there are many of them, apply to blockchain startups, blockchain leverage startups, in the same way that apply to any other business. That means it falls on each company, each set of founders to make a determination for themselves. Are their activities governed and regulated? And if so, are they complying? So the problem in the past is that all these ICO and token sales were done in a manner that did not take into account or completely disregard relevant laws. Now regulators are stepping up and saying, no, you have to observe and comply with the laws that we have in place. It's not that the SEC is saying that ICOs are illegal or bad, quite the opposite, quite the contrary. I think it's important, the importance of blockchain as technology is recognized by most in the government. The question is compliance, and Republic is here to help companies comply better by providing a means for them to provide tokens and access retail participants in a compliant manner.
Yeah, so I think that as far as, just kind of back to regulation, it's certainly needed, but do you think that the regulators today, I mean, are they kind of letting the space flourish? I mean, are they, is SEC specifically, and maybe some of the other regulators, are they keeping a hands-off approach? As I've been reading the press, and the SEC has always said that, hey, we want to let the space flourish. And then they kind of, they definitely took some action against maybe fraud and some other things that were more or less obvious. But now they're sort of looking at, coming after companies that just raised and maybe didn't raise correctly or something like that. So what are your thoughts on that?
I can only speak to the SEC, and I think that they have been underappreciated for their pragmatism. Are they neither taking a hands-off approach, nor are they being overly aggressive? They are taking the time to understand the impact of this technology and the current market participants on the financial market. They're trying to see the extent to which investor may potentially be harmed or have been harmed. And they very cautiously identify those that have yet to comply, and then even then, whether they decide to enforce against non-compliance, that's in their discretion. But nothing that I have seen so far suggests anything but utmost pragmatism and thoughtfulness as a Securities and Exchange Commission.
But the SEC has been much more aggressive than the regulators in any other country that I'm aware of, except China. Right? China banned ICOs altogether. Maybe South Korea did as well for a time, and the SEC is not too far behind as far as shutting down projects.
You have the largest market, that is Japan, China, the United States, that have applied the securities law to token sales to these activities. Europe, that hasn't been a major hotbed, but I suspect that their securities law regime applies in very much the same way. Now, of course, different countries have different takes on each of these areas of the law and different application and enforcement approaches. So they're bound to be a divergence, but I don't think that compared to the major economies, not an island state, that I don't think that the U.S. has been overly conservative or restrictive.
But and for the great thing about Republic, right, is under regulation CF. And correct me if I'm wrong on any of these things. I'm by no means an expert on regulatory, but really allows anyone, right? There, and if a project is a fit and is chosen to be on your platform, it allows anyone, accredited or non-accredited investor, to invest. Am I correct?
Correct. And you can invest in a convertible note. You can invest in tokens. You can invest in anything that's deemed to be a security.
And are you guys sort of pursuing are you looking to become the brand name for launching token sales? And I know you're also involved with AngelList, which is an Angel Co. Sister company maybe, or some kind of relationship there. So are you looking to kind of move into that territory as well, or do you see yourselves as a general platform for raising funds?
Yeah, no. Raising fund is indeed primary issuance, right? So a token sale by the company is very much what we do on the crypto side, except that we also accommodate retail investors. We don't plan to touch the secondary market. Our cousin company, CoinList, takes on token sale for the largest and most credible, most well-known project.
For accredited investors, is that right? Gotcha.
And raising a very significant amount. Republic, is targeting different demographics, companies that are not looking to raise as large of an amount from accredited investors, or those that have a need to get tokens into the hand of non-accredited investor, may it be airdrops, may it be bounty programs or mining.
Gotcha. And so, and what do you think about, where is the Jobs Act today? I mean, does this sufficiently allow for this ecosystem of crowdfunding, quote unquote, to prosper? Can there be improvements? And if so, what are they in your opinion?
Yep, there can always be improvements. The system today works, but with some, significant limitations. One of which is that you can only raise $1 million on Republic as a function of SEC rules, right? So if that number is 5 million or 10 million, it's going to help a lot more projects to utilize Reg CF or regulation crowdfunding. Another piece is a pretty onerous accounting requirement that you have to disclose. You have to convert your financials to GAAP and then file a disclosure with the SEC. All of that today has been productized and done relatively cheaply. But the more any reduction in these disclosure requirements would definitely be a welcomed change for founders.
And why do you think that is? I mean, why do you think that we need a regulator, or why do you think the regulator exists to tell hardworking people how to spend their money? I mean, I can today, I mean, I'm sitting here in Boston. There's probably 2 or 3 casinos within a 30-minute drive of me. I can go over there and lose all my money, and no one's going to bat an eye, right? Or I can go and buy lottery and a bunch of other things. Why do we need the SEC telling us how to spend our money?
I love this question. Laws don't come into place out of thin air. The current securities law framework in the US came out of the Great Depression in the 30s, when corporation businesses duped and sold investment offerings to retirees and to retail folks, and so much prevalent fraud during the time that led to people losing their livelihood. So the infinite wisdom of the United States government at the time decided, like, hey, we gotta draw the line somewhere. If you're wealthy enough, if you have enough wealth, let's just call it a millionaire, then you can, we assume that you have some sophistication and you can look out for your own interests. If you willy-nilly fall beneath this random line at $1 million in net worth or $200,000 in income, then we assume that the government has to protect you, and that the company has to comply with all of these requirements that are extremely expensive to undertake. So fast forward 80 years later, indeed, that's the argument that we have, that we made. Every year, $100 billion lost to the casinos, another $80 billion spent in lottery ticket, predominantly by non-accredited investors. So if a fraction of that is used to deploy into early stage investing in entrepreneurship, imagine the world that can be. And so the current legal framework enables that and limits the total exposure on retail investor, but it does come with a number of disclosure requirements that a company has to comply with.
Yeah, so for everyone out there listening, stop going to casinos and invest in private companies. It's a much better return. And this is not financial advice, by the way.
That's CEO.com. You have to confirm all of the acknowledgement first, but yeah.
But in all honesty, I mean, because going to a casino, yeah, it's probably a slightly different category. It's entertainment, right? You go there, at least for me. I mean, I can go for an evening once or twice a year. Go to a restaurant and spend $50 on playing poker, playing blackjack or something like that. But it could certainly be a place where people spend a lot more money than they can, with the hopes of winning. If I go there, I'm not hoping to win. I'm just spending time, right? But so I think a smarter approach is to actually think about, hey, where can I invest? I mean, whether it's private companies, or maybe it's stock markets, or maybe it's whatever else it may be, real estate, right? But there's a lot more better ways to make money than go to the casino.
And early stage investing stands alone compared to other types of investing, in that it's much more personal. You get to know the founders, you get to know why they do what they do. So if gambling is about entertainment in hope of a very remote return potential, then startup investing is about engagement, it's about education and building the future economy by deciding which business you want to see prosper, rather than punting that decision to banks and massive investment fund. So I have no doubt that one day people would think of micro investing in early stage businesses as standard and non-issue and normal, as they do with recycling, with voting, with many things that once was new but now deemed to be a socially and personally fulfilling and engaging thing to do.
And that's your ultimate mission.
Yes, the ultimate mission is to turn entrepreneurship into a shared economy. That the next Facebook the first money in the next Facebook should not be Peter Thiel or a large venture fund. It should be the classmate. Instead of a pitcher of beer, they invest $25 in their dorm's idea. And that college campus. Hopefully it doesn't need to be Harvard. It can be a women's college in Moscow, and get funded by a stay-at-home mom in Alabama because they believe in it in a way that's doable, seamlessly cross-border, $30, $20 at a time, with millions of people participating. I think that's the word that I want to see, and that's what the Republic team, all of us, are working day and night to see.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love the way you think about that, that Facebook or another large company, the wealth should be shared, right? And it's become very much borderless. I think also with the advent of cryptocurrency, right? Now that the world is almost is one, you could start a company in country A and receive investments from an unlimited amount of places. So for those people that are listening out there, what kind of companies should look at Republic as an avenue to raise funds? Is it, you guys, have a preference? Is it tech? Is it consumer? Or is it all of the above? What are your thoughts?
If you're a very early stage company, then as long as you have a relatable story, something that you think that people spending 5 minutes reading about it would understand. So if yours is a deep AI project that only Stanford scientists would get, probably not for us right now. And you got to be willing to spend a lot of time evangelizing on social media, talk to your high school ex-girlfriend or boyfriend and that guy that you bought a couch from 3 years ago, and convert them. And on the other hand, if you're a consumer folk-facing company, and you have an established user base, what better way to convert these supporters, these customers, into brand ambassadors for you by giving them a little bit a share in your business. And that's why Uber and Airbnb recently hoping in a very public fashion for ways to do that, to reward the drivers and the home lister on Airbnb with equity in the company.
Totally.
So across the range of private startups, as long as it's a consumer-facing business with either a large community that they want to engage or a business model for newer startups that are relatable, very much potentially suitable for crowdfunding.
Awesome. So what's next for you, man? What are you on to? I guess tomorrow, a year from now, 3 years from now. What are you thinking about? I know it's a lot to ask, but what are you thinking about these days?
Tomorrow, flying down to to hang out with my family for a day, and then next week, hop on a plane and do what I usually do, which is a lot of like talks and meetings and convincing people why they should come on aboard to on the mission. No, I'm just so grateful that God, I mean, we have like you and take an interest in us and our so many other partners. So it's just about an hour and keep working hard and grinding and make sure that we do our best to not disappoint those that believe in us.
Cool. Do you think you're living the American dream right now? I mean, are you on your path to pursuing happiness, and how does that pursuit of happiness happen for you?
I actually would love to get your take on how you define the American dream, and then I'll answer my questions based on your answer.
I didn't think the tables would be turned, but I think for me, the American dream. I mean, I've thought about it before, and it sort of morphs from one to the other. When I was younger, it was just I just had a simple thought that maybe by being rich, this is the American dream. As I sort of matured a little bit, I quickly understood that wealth is not everything. So I think that the American dream is about opportunity. It's about having access to other people that enable you to drive your own opportunity, and that may be riding a skateboard down the street and being great at that, or that may be becoming an attorney, starting your own company. As long as there's the ecosystem and other people who are vested in we're vested in each other's success, I think that's what the American dream is for me.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, and I would agree very much. I think in saying the same thing in slightly different word on my end, that is, the opportunity to be what you're meant to do best. What if you're meant to be an amazing carpenter or an amazing dentist, that you get all the opportunities to realize that, make that decision, and be that you and do what you meant to do, and best. No one can do something best if they're not happy at it. So it's a combination of opportunity, access, and happiness at the same time. And I cannot be happier. I can't imagine that that there's a more meaningful experience for me. And I hope that it's going to go on for the next, 5, 6 decades. But if one time that something else becomes more meaningful, then happily pass on the baton and pursue that. But yes, I mean, this is such a magical land, this country, with all of its ups and downs. But yeah, it's truly, in many ways, a complex, but still a land of opportunity like nowhere else.
That's awesome, man. It's been such a pleasure speaking with you, Kendrick. I think you're one of the most insightful and interesting people I've interviewed. It's been, and what you're doing is truly amazing. I mean, I'm a huge fan of a lot of the projects you've been involved in, of Republic that you're involved with today. So I definitely wish you the best of luck with everything. Are there anything, any links, anything social you want to mention where people can maybe go and check out some of the stuff you're thinking about?
Yes, we had republic.co.co, not .com, so republic.co.co. And yes, thank you so much for that. It's been such an honor and pleasure to be on the exchange. Wish you and everyone else listening an amazing Thanksgiving and a fantastic New Year.
Awesome. Thank you so much.